Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lyft Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So, 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lyft Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. So let me introduce Karen Kohlberg, Suzanne McDowell, and Ralph Carlton, who are the co-CEOs at King Arthur Flour, which is a certified B Corporation based in Norwich, Vermont. Welcome to the three of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Great. So maybe let's start. If one of you wants to take the basic question, what is King Arthur Flour? Because I know that your company does a lot more than just flour.
So King Arthur Flour is, first of all, we're a 225-year-old company, and we are I think of us as always being pretty unique and not having a lot of direct competitors out there because we certainly are a flour company and that's our heritage, but we're all about baking, and our mission is to really build communities through baking, and it always has been, and it sort of guides everything we do. So I say really different from others that are out there because we have a bakery, a school, and and then our sort of consumer-facing business where we sell, hopefully, most, if not all, everything that the passionate baker is looking for. And the more recent attributes that I think we'll get into a little bit more. We became a 100% employee-owned company starting in 1996, and then we were a founding B Corporation in 2007. And those pieces just felt like natural extensions from the founders of the company when they did decide to pass it on to the employees, because they sort of basically was how we've always done business in a way that was made a transition to an ESOP and sort of the discovery of the B Lab and B Corp very natural for us.
Fantastic. And I'm not sure if the three of you knew, but I actually found out about B Corporations because of King Arthur Flour. I was baking cookies with your unbleached all-purpose flour, and I think you were one of the first companies that prominently put it on your packaging. And so
we were,
yes.
We were really proud of that. And it was funny. It was sort of B Lab was very excited. I think it was B Lab and the folks at B Lab that we decided to do that. It felt so appreciative that to me felt of course we would do that. Why wouldn't we do that? But it was. We were, again, proud of it and proud to devote space to it, and just so excited that they were founding in 2007, I think there's over 1,500 maybe now, or getting close to that.
Yeah, so now I think there's almost, there may be 1,700 by now, so in 48, almost 50 countries.
I know, amazing.
Fantastic growth. Well, why don't we do a brief, you each are co-CEOs, but you each wear a different hat. So maybe we'll start with Ralph. Ralph, in addition to co-CEO, what's your other role at King Arthur Flour?
We divvy up our roles, as you said, and each of us has oversight responsibilities for different areas of the business. But we also work very closely and collaboratively to act as one CEO, too. I am the Chief Financial Officer of the company, so I oversee finance. I also oversee sales, both in terms of what we call our family flour business, which is when you go to grocery or retail stores where you buy our products. We also have a bakery flour business where we sell in 50-pound bags or larger quantities flour and other products to bakeries. And I oversee operations and something called promotion management, which is how we work with our retailers.
Fantastic. And as a brief background, how did you hear about King Arthur Flour, and when did you get involved with the company?
Well, I heard about King Arthur Flour as a customer, as a happy customer living in the New England area. It was a regular feature in our household. King Arthur Flour, 3 years ago or so, was looking for a CFO, and I heard about that then. And for me, it was just a tremendous opportunity to join a very unique company, and I feel lucky ever since.
Fantastic. And Suzanne, what's the other hat you wear at King Arthur Flour?
So the other hat I wear is obviously the human resource function, as well as our facilities, our IT, and most recently our PR efforts. So again, like Ralph said, we each have these functional responsibilities, but kind of the power that comes out of us working together as a co-CEO group is really remarkable.
Fantastic. And I'll dive into that because I think that's incredibly interesting. Before we started the podcast, we were trying to think of any other companies that also had a tripartite CEO arrangement. Like we know, I think Whole Foods has co-CEOs. I know Beneficial State Bank, one of the BCorps here in San Francisco Bay Area, has co-CEOs.
Right.
But this is really interesting. And Suzanne, how did you first hear about King Arthur Flour?
So we moved here. My husband and I moved here 16 or so years ago from Utah, and we moved here for his job, and we rented a place across the street from, at the time, our retail store. And I had children at that time, young children, and we'd walk across the street, and I'd get a chocolate croissant from our bakery, and the energy in the retail store was so uplifting. The people were so happy. And then I'd look across the parking lot, and I'd see this beautiful post and beam building, and it would say corporate entrance, and I would listen to VPR, and I'd hear that King Arthur donated space to VPR, and I'm like, wow, that seems like an interesting place. And with my background in human resource work, there was an opening that I applied for, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. And Karen, what are your functional responsibilities? And I'm interested to hear your background story about how you heard about King Arthur as well.
So my functional responsibilities are I oversee marketing and product development and all of what we call Camelot, which is, as I was referring to actually before we started, one of our facilities up here where we have a bakery, store, school, and cafe. So that we're also right across the river from Dartmouth College, and we also have a cafe in their library. So all those public-facing facilities up here. So, which I always consider the sort of the physical manifestation of the brand. I want people to go in there and be inspired to bake. So I oversee all of them.
Yeah, and did you? How did you first hear about it?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's one other piece of our direct-to-consumer business, and that's our catalog. So within the marketing realm, we have the whole direct-to-consumer business. We have a catalog and a website, and the whole e-commerce business, and that reports into me as well. Ralph's pointing that out to me that I left it off my list. And so my background, so I probably heard of King Arthur Flour. I went to graduate school in this area where we are and moved away to San Francisco, to your neck of the woods, and was there for a decade. And then when I came back, my husband and I moved back and just for a change of life and wanted a different lifestyle. And King Arthur Flour was a place that I sort of was one of the one places in this area that I was sort of hoping to work. I don't have any professional baking experience, but I've always been a passionate baker, home baker, if you will. And I actually during high school and college worked for a bakery for 4 or 5 years. So anyway, so then when I connected with our prior CEO, got together and just, had lunch and talked about whether there might be opportunities. And I always love sharing this story because at that time, it was 5 years prior to when I started. And then, I've got together, and there weren't, it was much smaller than we are now. We're still small, maybe in the grand scheme of things. And then, a few years later, Suzanne called me and said, I had just had my third child, and she was 7 months old, and said, we have a job. Are you interested? And I just love that that's kind of how we are. We build relationships with people, or we kind of come across people that we think would be great for our teams, our organization. And she just called and said, hey, do you want to come interview? And as Suzanne said, that I've been here ever since, and that's about 11 and a half years ago.
Wow. That's a great lack of turnover, I think, on your team. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So, Suzanne, you've been there since I think 2000. What's the evolution of this unique 3-person leadership team? How did this come about, and what was sort of the thinking and rationale behind it?
So again, to reference our previous CEO, Karen Ralph and I worked with him. Obviously, Karen and I worked with him for 11 and 15 years. Not 11. Yes, 11. So we've been here that long, so a little less. And he decided to kind of move on from the organization, and as a way, the way he led the organization as the one CEO, president, was to really have his leadership team at the table with him, making strategic decisions, making really important, critical moves for the organization. So we have a governing body, a board of directors, and they witnessed that. They saw that. It was successful. So it really, I think this structure that's in place now is really kind of it's in Steve's honor and his legacy to some degree, that the board saw it in place, it worked, it made sense, and we've been now in this role for 2 years. It's hard to believe sometimes, right? 2 years,
right?
Time flies. So that's really, I think if Steve's style as a leader was different, but he role modeled collaboration and groupthink and let's get in there and really make good decisions together. And we're still doing that together. So that's really why I believe that the board, it was I don't maybe know that they really paused to put this structure in place, and it seems it's working.
So it sounds like the sort of it was sort of already in effect before it was legally in effect. It sounds like.
Right. I mean, because of the way Steve led the organization and had this leadership team, and literally we were at the table making all the decisions with him. To become a BCorp, we were real involved in that. The transition to 100% employee owned. I mean, all of those big decisions. He relied on us to be there with him. So yeah.
And I think it was the right thing at that time for our organization. It was such a natural extension of where we were. And I think what's nice about being, a private company and a B Corp, and as I think collaborative and progressive as we are, is that if at the next transition point, whenever that is, it's not necessarily always going to be three co-CEOs. And that's something that we would probably have open discussions with the board about whenever that time came. But it's certainly, there's as you know, I think that there's a power that comes from, bringing ideas together and pushing one another further to think about things, and doing that. Sometimes, we don't have this here, but in the expressions, it's lonely at the top, and not having someone to work with the way we three do. I think it would be a very different job. I love the fact that we have the three of us.
And I also think, Ryan, it's critical. not to pat ourselves too much on the back, but it's working because of who we are and how we show up.
I was just going to say that.
So I think if we were different, and let's say, Suzanne, I really wanted to have this job on my own, and I had a mission, and I was driven, and I was going after something, it maybe wouldn't work as well. But I know that the role I play for the organization is better with Karen and Ralph by my side. It works. So it's quite powerful. And who knows? Maybe lots more people will do it after this podcast.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and maybe Ralph, you could speak to this. Do you think it works because there is a board of directors? Because for example, Suzanne, I saw that you were at Patagonia before, and that was the Schoenards own 100% of the company. So there was, and maybe, so Ralph, do you think it could work at a company without a board, or do you think the board provides some structure and guidance that's actually helpful for the three of you?
I think in this particular case, the board was instrumental in setting up this structure and in supporting us in this structure. In effect, they are our partners in this mission that we have right now. And they work very hard with us to be thoughtful at the beginning and decided what some of the challenges might be, what we needed to think about. They've been our partners in working it through. They've been tremendous supporters of this structure. But they've watched it. I think if you were to interview them, you'd see they're watching it closely. What it says about them, though, is they are comfortable with risk. They're experimenters. They're not bound by tradition. And I think those are hopefully qualities that describe King Arthur Flour as a company, not just the arrangement between the board and management. To your other question, I don't think it's limited to our particular structure. I think a lot of the parallels in what we do are found in partnerships, in private partnerships. If you look at, law firms, start running through professional partnerships and other places like that. I think it's not uncommon at all that some combination of a duo or a committee is in fact in charge of governing the company. So I don't think you necessarily need a board to do it.
Great. And so, Karen, one question for you is, this has been interesting from my point of view, is what types of decisions does this three-part CEO structure work well on? And when is it a little more challenging? Because, part of the benefit of getting into a little bit of the details is I'd love to hear when it works well, and also it's beneficial to say, sometimes it doesn't work quite as well because of this.
Well, I think it works well when we're working on sort of long-range strategy and talking about paths and directions of where we want to take the organization. Just because that's both interesting and fun, and it's also complex, and it requires a lot of dialogue and analysis and thinking and talking. And to be perfectly honest, I'm thinking about your question of when it doesn't work well, because I'd be hard pressed to. Nothing jumps to mind, which I think is a good thing. If there are things that we lead, as we've talked about, our functional areas, and there are responsibilities that we have that tie to our sort of skills that we bring, where I think we're off making decisions and leading our respective areas and teams. And it's not that it doesn't work well, but we're not necessarily connecting on every decision that sort of falls under our respective purviews. And I think that's okay. And I think that's a good thing, because if we had to all weigh in on every decision, then imagine the pace at which we would move would be very slow. But I think that the challenges that exist is making sure we bring back to the team what is going on that they need to know as my co-CEOs, and that we remain informed at the CEO level for the financial area that sort of that Ralph leads, or when Suzanne's taking a deeper dive into a benefits strategy or benefits plans. What comes to the sort of leadership team table and discussion and decision making and what's to inform. And then I think, again, you're saying, I think you're trying to understand, which I think is a good thing for maybe your audience that they might be curious about, is what, how is it hard? And I think the communication is really important amongst the three of us, and that we're both proactive in it, and that it's a goal of ours to make sure we are keeping each other in the loop, and that we're also then holding each other accountable to that. And just most recently, Suzanne said, hey, because we also sit in an open office environment, and so we literally see, we're physically next to each other all day long, and within earshot, if you're 3 or 4 feet away. But being a little bit more formal and sitting down, just the three of us, and talking, because we do have a couple people that support us, and we tend to have structured meetings. But just the three of us sitting down formally, but just the three of us talking is something that we will do more of, because it's the casual, less long-term, less strategic conversation is as important as the spending time and making sure we're communicating not smaller, but things that maybe aren't. They don't necessarily need to know every single day. Does that help?
That's great. And I think you sort of answered my question, because I think the distinction is that if you were co-CEOs of the whole company without functional areas and you had to all agree on each decision, it probably wouldn't work very well. Whereas if you're managing your functional areas and you sort of trust each other to manage those key areas, then the actual decisions that the three of you need to make collaboratively can be a lot less, or that someone's already done the work to bring a proposal to the three of you.
Right. And there's a tremendous amount of trust.
Great word to use.
Yeah, there's just, the kind of rigor that Karen kind of goes about the marketing efforts, and Ralph with his sales, and then the trust that they are asking all these questions, so that when we all three are discussing it, like, they have vetted it very far down, that I feel very informed on that. But I think it's interesting, because from my lens, my areas are more functional areas of support to the organization. And so it maybe doesn't feel quite as much of a stretch, because if I've got to get buy-in, if I'm gonna recommend, or our teams are gonna recommend kind of some initiative around space planning or compensation or a radical benefits, that's no different than I've always functioned. So there's a little bit of more of a burden on me, which if I'm feeling in my co-CEO role that I'm unclear on this initiative in marketing and sales, I need to go after that and figure it out, which is what precipitated the conversation the other day. Like, we need to talk a little bit more about these things. But
and I think several people have alluded to the potential watch-outs if someone were to try this, and I think Karen alluded to one, which is the risk of slow decision-making. And we've worked very hard, as both Karen and Suzanne have said, to make sure we communicate well and we keep things moving. But we were aware from the start that was a risk of this structure. The second, which we never probably think about, but it would be a watch-out for others to try this, is we really speak as one voice. And to the organization, there's no mommy-daddy going on here that, if I want a different answer, I go to Suzanne.
Right.
We've never thought that way, but you could envision in a different situation that could be really problematic in something like this.
Yeah, and Ralph, let's maybe talk about, I noticed in your, sorry to out you, but looks like Coca-Cola and Goldman Sachs in your background. So let's talk about that sort of, and especially employee ownership and relation. What did you notice coming into an employee-owned company in terms of the culture versus some of your past, more traditional corporate experience?
You're being very polite. There could not be two more diametrically opposed experiences between the two. And I've worked in not just Coke, but I've worked for some very large corporations, and they're very good at many things. So, they exist for a reason. The linkage between an individual employee and the company is much harder when you're an organization of 30,000 people. And as a public company, you've got a responsibility to shareholders, and it just creates a very different environment. And that's not specific to Coke. That's probably any large corporation. Here, it's a really magic environment, I think, in many ways. Employee owners are very special. It really is something you've got to be part of to understand. Everyone comes to work as an owner, but it's not literally as I own a share and I have a financial interest. It's more along the line of a small business that's my business and the attitude you bring to work. And you put together, we're 375 people now, 375 people all doing different things, but united by that sense of commitment and loyalty to make this a better place. It is a truly special experience and unlike anything I've been involved in my career.
Suzanne, I've heard, I'm not sure if this is apocryphal or it's true, but I've heard one of the reasons that Yvon Chouinard has not made Patagonia a worker-owned cooperative is that he feels that it would actually become slightly more conservative in terms of its environmental activism, because he believes that the sort of amount of pressure and forward progress that he can do as a sole owner is once people own the company, they might be a little less likely to want to donate so much money to charities or have such great employee benefits. Do you think that that's true, or does that play out at all at King Arthur Flour, that there is some aspect of people are a little more deliberate and thoughtful and don't quite like to do as much sort of radical or activist things?
I really can't speak to the experience with Yvon and Melinda Chouinard, but I can tell you that I had nothing but a great experience at Patagonia. It's a company that I will always admire, and when I'm asked to talk about kind of heroes that people role models I look up to, I mean, that business is unbelievable. And at King Arthur, I don't believe that would be the case, because I think we do a lot to tend to all of our stakeholders. So if we were just about, let's just say, if King Arthur was just about the environment and we had really poor practices around kind of employment and pay and benefits and all those things, our employees would say, this is not okay. This is not okay. But because we have this balanced approach that we collectively are going to be better as a kind of population if we're tending to, our communities, the environment, our workers, and keeping that all in balance. I find our employee-owned, like Ralph was saying, it is an honor to come to work here every day. We've just created this new culture statement, and I had a great conversation this morning with someone, because one of the lines on there is, it was a personnel conversation I was having with someone when they were struggling with their leader, and one of our lines on our culture statement is, we are psyched to come to work every day, because what we're doing is very meaningful work, and that each person is valued and they show up and they do it, and then they're psyched that we then are making donations through 1% for the Planet or to the local hospital fundraisers, things like that. I think that's here. That is baked in. It's one of our phrases. And it was here when Frank and Brenna Sands had the business. And, then they sold the company to the ESOP. So it is kind of baked into our DNA, much like I think when I was at Patagonia and I, was a leader of people, the people that chose to come work there, that is baked into their DNA. They are saving the world, saving the environment. So I think Yvon and Melinda, their legacy will continue with, Fletcher and Claire, their children, and the environment will be paramount for that business. I mean, that's what I associate Patagonia with. Great quality clothing, and it matters. So yeah, I can go on and on.
It's interesting, because I think there's a lot of companies who are considering this move to employee ownership, but a lot of CEOs they don't really know. They're interested, but there's sort of we don't know what to do or how to go about it. Do any of the three of you have particular things that those CEOs should be thinking about, or resources or recommendations that they could look to help them with that transition?
Well, there are two thoughts on that. One is, if you're thinking at all about becoming an ESOP, in your region, go find a company that's an ESOP already. One of the great things about the ESOP community, and we were the beneficiary of this, and we do this all the time, is ESOP people talk to ESOP people routinely. There are many groups out there, and You call any ESOP CEO and say, I'm thinking about it, you're going to get your phone call returned.
That's right.
And a chance to really talk it through. ESOP is a wonderful form of governance.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't necessarily right for every situation. There are financial considerations with it. There are certain cultural considerations. When it works, it's wonderful, but it doesn't work 100% of the time.
And there are absolutely there's the National Center for Employee Ownership, which is located in Oakland, out by you, and then there's the ESOP Association, the National ESOP Association, which is having their annual conference right now. We have many of our employees down there. We won New England Employee of the Year, and maybe we'll win national. Who knows? So there are absolutely agencies, and this is an open invitation for anyone out there wanting to have a dialogue, a conversation, to call any one of us.
Fantastic. And Karen, we spoke briefly at Expo West when I saw you.
Yes.
And we talked about a newer project that King Arthur Flour is doing on the West Coast called the Bread Lab. Can you tell folks what is the Bread Lab and what's your plans with this idea going forward?
So the Bread Lab is part of Washington State University, and it's within the university structure. And it started by Dr. Stephen Jones, and he is to the extent that they're renowned, a renowned wheat breeder. And we kind of just through baking became in touch with him. I'm going to say 5-6 years ago, and what he's trying to do out there is, develop wheat that it can grow and thrive in the Pacific Northwest. And as part of that, the idea is that you're connecting the farmer, the miller, and the baker. To really do that well, you want the trio coming together. And so, as part of his work, he reached out to us. And the gentleman who started our bakery, the guy by the name of Jeffrey Hamelman. He's a certified master baker, and he started our bakery in 2000. And anyways, we just started this sort of, again, very natural relationship of Jeffrey going out, working with them, and we started sending bakers out there because they wanted bakers to come bake with the wheat that they were growing. And we just started supporting the efforts of the Bread Lab, and it has the partnership has deepened and grown over the past several years. There's an annual event called the Grain Gathering, again, where from small home bakers to professional bakers to companies like King Arthur Flour and Whole Foods are out there supporting the development of a local grain economy. And I think they're really we're trying to find out if there's a way to grow wheat, get a mill in place, and build this system where the wheat can grow. There's a miller to mill it, and there's a customer that will buy it. Whether it's direct or through grocery stores. That's all down the road to be determined. So anyways, we've been partnering with the Bread Lab in a sort of a research and collaborative research and learning way. And then most recently, maybe a year or so ago, we started exploring the idea of having a school out there, because that's sort of a core piece of who we are, is really teaching people to bake. And we have a school out here, and we do some teaching online, and it was sort of a natural extension of that relationship. So we're in the process of building a school, and that will open in the fall of this year. And we'll have sort of the same. You've not been out here, but you can go online and read about the school that we have here in Norwich, and we'll have a similar school out there and we teach we teach all year long, and it's again everything from a 3-hour home baker to week-long professional classes, and it's going to be the baking school at the Bread Lab.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned this regional economy where you can grow and mill and also sell the flour or the product itself. I love that idea. It's something we're particularly interested in at Lift Economy, is helping to replicate those types of models. I guess my question would lead into a larger sort of vision. I'll let any of the three of you answer this, but what's the 25, 50, or 100-year plan for King Arthur Flour? Is it regenerative, carbon sequestering supply chains and local living economies, or, because I like to put it to, using Yvonne Chouinard's framework of 100 years, because you're definitely, like, we're all definitely dead then. And so it's like we're not personally going to be involved, but it's like, what is the legacy, or what do you hope to see King Arthur Flour doing on that sort of scale, that sort of time frame?
I'll let these guys add as well, but I'll start by saying a couple things. This partnership out west and what we're doing next, one of the things we're also doing that sort of I didn't mention, we're also working with a small group trying to exploring the building of a mill, small mill, and it's all, so this phase that we're in right now, and we're looking out over a 24-month window right now, and wouldn't it be, let's see if we can put all those pieces together and make it work and learn again to see if is it replicable. And as you said, it's a big, there are so many questions that then come with that idea that we certainly won't be able to explore today. We actually, it's funny that you say, what are you doing over the next 25, 30 years? Because our board is in town today, and we'll be spending, the better part of Friday, actually talking about that in a way of, we have this vision of building community through baking. And we're going to talk about what does it mean, what does community mean to us? And we, on a small scale right now, we do a lot of things all around baking and building communities, whether it's teaching children and teaching adults to bake, and our employees are volunteering in their communities. We are, when we think about our sort of philanthropic efforts, we're dedicated to working to end hunger. Mm-hmm. We have certain issues that as a food company that we think are important, and we're trying to put resources to. So we see all of those elements that we're currently working on being really part of those things. To me, are as important to our legacy. If I were to, when we're all not here 100 years from now, that we worked with sort of integrity and using it, to use the BCorp, their tagline, but using our business as a force for good. Whether or not we're able to build the local grain economy that we're sort of exploring right now out in the Pacific Northwest. So there's a lot that we see that we can do over the next. Our horizon might not. Let's look out over the next, sort of 5 to 10. But it's whether we're working in any kind of product development that we're working on, because we will bring to it what's important for the mission and the vision and how we do business. I'm sort of proud of I guess I'm looking very, I say incrementally, meaning the business that we do every day and that I think we'll continue to do, whether we're, again, looking out over 24 months, 5 years, or 100 years. I'm going to look back and or somebody's going to look back, and I think what we'll have done is something people can be proud of because of how King Arthur Flour has always done business and will continue to do business. But if you guys want to add
I just add to it, we talk about 100-year time horizons, and we're all smiling, as I'm sure you are. But we're sitting, we're part of a company that's actually a 225-year-old company. Mm-hmm. So 100-year time horizons are actually not crazy things to talk about. The company has been committed to baking right from the start, and I think we all envision that baking, which has been around for thousands of years, isn't necessarily going away. Mm-hmm. So there is a core conviction, back to our vision of building community through baking. I think the other side of it is how that's done, and that's evolved over time in terms of how agriculture has evolved, how commerce has evolved, how retailing has evolved. You start running through how nutrition has evolved. So none of us necessarily know perfectly how all those things are going to look 100 years from today. But I think our hope is that the values that have made us strong over 225 years, those are the enduring pieces. That if we were having this interview 100 years from today, you would talk about our commitment to baking. You would talk about our integrity. You'd talk about our commitment to quality. You'd talk about, we hope, that employee ownership was fundamental to who we are and allowed us to grow throughout all these years. That isn't to say we wouldn't be leaders in certain aspects of local produce or you'd run through any of those issues. But over a 100-year time frame, those are all going to morph. I'm not sure we know what the issue is going to be 90 years from today, but hopefully the things that it would endure is the way we do business and the contribution we make to society by doing it.
Yeah, and I think that you're really onto something with this bread lab and the sort of a regional economy, because I think the world really needs those models. So I really applaud you and King Arthur Flour for pushing that forward, because it's, companies like yours who have already proven for 220 years that this is using business for good as a viable business model. And so doing innovative things like the regional bread lab are great. Yeah.
I was going to just add to that. It was really, again, it kind of goes back to our structure of being, again, a private company, and of course the BCorp and who we are as a company enables us to do those. I mean, it's important to us just because of what we want out of our business. I think it's harder. You've got to be patient. You've got to be willing to. We don't know as I was saying, we don't know what's going to happen as we try to put together the mill and see if the wheat's going to grow. All those pieces. You're sort of taking a risk. It might not work in its current form, but we'll learn something and we'll try to do it differently. And I guess I'm pretty confident it'll work at a certain scale out there, and then the challenge will be for us, what do we learn from it, and how can we do it? How can we support that type of initiative somewhere else? Whether it will be at the pace that might be needed in a different organization, I can't answer, but I'm certainly proud that we are able to do it today.
Right. For a 225-year-old company, we don't act like we're that old in a negative sense. To talk and listen to Karen talk about kind of the nimbleness and going after it, and it's risky, and we're going to do it. It's I think it's just really exciting for all of our stakeholders.
So who inspires you? Which organizations or individuals do any of the three of you look to when you say, that person or that organization is really leading the type of change we need to see in the world?
I'll speak too. I had the distinct honor of working for an inventor named Cain, who's been behind many fundamental medical device discoveries, dialysis and things like that. And he has an approach to identifying and tackling global issues that certainly humbled me, and I think would humble almost anyone other than Dean, which is to really find out what's wrong in the world, and as he would say, better than I would any day of the week, other than you can't change the laws of physics, anything's possible if you put your mind to it. And we may be a little more constrained by some of the practicalities of business, but I think that kind of an attitude really opens your mind up to the types of things you could do.
And mine is the obvious, Yvonne and Melinda. And I can go back to 1984 when Yvonne gave me my Outrageous Achievement Award, and he spoke to all of us, and he said, we're doomed. We are doomed. The environment is doomed. And, that he has created a movement that has, people are replicating and, going after daily. It's very inspirational what that business has done for the environment, and their whole move to organic cotton, and talk about taking a risk and just saying we're going to do it. And granted, private company, he could do that, but I do think of both of them, both Melinda and Yvonne, as people I look up to.
And it's an interesting question for me, because I've learned my background getting here. There were people along the way that I felt were real critical mentors or really critical, inspirations that make up kind of who I am as a leader, and kind of how I function and what drives me. But when I think about sort of what inspires me here, and when I say, I'll often say, to Suzanne said earlier, we're psyched to come to work. I love coming to work, and I love it here. And what inspires me really is a lot of the people in our organization. I learned so much being around some of the people who are newer to our organization and being just open to the fact that I don't have all the answers. We three are the first to say that, and therefore being around people and building teams of people that are, now I'll speak just for myself, smarter than I am, brighter than I am, or different experiences than I have. And that's what makes me so excited, to come here every day. It's the sort of the team that I work with, but these guys, present company included, as well as the sort of teams throughout the organization, because I feel like that's how I learn.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.